Hey everyone, so for today's video I have 10 different tips that could help you guys improve on your manga colorings, but just a side note, I don't necessarily feel like these tips are specifically just for manga coloring. I do actually feel like they could help if you're just someone who wants to illustrate. Hopefully they do help, and yeah, I don't really want to keep this intro too long, so we might as well just get into the video. So coloring line art is definitely something a lot of artists do. I really do believe that it can elevate your work if you at least implement it properly. If you're someone who is familiar with some of the works that I've made, then you will obviously know that it's something that I always do, because I really do believe that it can make it like a lot better. So as you're gonna see right here, I'm just going to be showing you guys how I do that. I usually just start by making a new layer above the manga panel, and obviously I clip that layer so that everything I do there affects the manga panel itself. And one thing you're going to notice is that the colors that I try to pick are going to be corresponding with the palette of the coloring itself. You want the colors to be similar to the palette or the overall composition that you've got going on. It's just a lot better that way. And I'm just using a lasso fill tool, but honestly any brush will get the job done. So I have Utah's skin done, and I'm not just gonna stop here. I'm actually gonna apply this principle onto other parts of the character. So right now I'm adding a dark blue shade onto the jacket area. You can obviously see it's nothing too bright, nothing too dark to where it already looks like it's black. You just kind of want it to be a subtle change. So this is what it looks like when I color my line art. For those of you who are Clip Studio users, there is an auto action that I use myself, and it's easy to find. All you have to do is just search line haze, and it's this first one over here on the far left. For those of you who do not have Clip Studio, I'll show you guys how to do it. So you're going to want to go on the manga panel layer, go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I personally feel like the sweet spot is around 6 to 8. I do know that in other programs it's not gonna be the exact same value. Maybe 6 to 8 range might actually look stronger or weaker. It depends on the program, but you just kind of want it to be like a slight haze. So Clip Studio users definitely stick between 6 to 8. Gaussian blur is probably, if not the first or most common filter that you're going to come across, and it's very easy to apply. Just Clip Studio users, filter, Gaussian blur, and boom, there you have it. However, there are some tips that I can give you so that you can use it in a more efficient way. So as you see here in this clip, my background is completely separated from my main characters here. So I'd recommend that before you start your colorings, you separate the background line art and the character line art. It might be a little bit tedious, but it definitely does go a long way when you're trying to depict depth within your coloring while using the Gaussian blur effect. So the noise filter is just another one that I really enjoy using on all of my colorings. I think I just mainly like the texture that it gives it. So for Clip Studio users, just make a new layer, filter, render, Perlin noise, and just scale it down. You don't want it to be overbearing. Amplitude doesn't matter too much, but it does strengthen the noise a little bit. I think that scaling is basically the only setting that really matters. So after that, just set that layer to overlay or soft light and lower the opacity to your desire. I usually stick between 15 to 30, but I think it mainly just depends on the coloring itself. Some might need more, some might need less. So there are different ways to apply chromatic aberration onto your coloring, but I won't be necessarily going through how to do it. I mainly use an auto action because it makes the process seamless. It's just one click. I do know that if you have the later versions of Clip Studio, that there is an effect option for chromatic aberration. So for those of you who have the later versions, I'm sure you can just go to the filter tab and add it there. But for me, who's stuck on the old versions, I just use the auto actions. Bloom is another filter that I occasionally use. I don't think it's necessary for every single coloring, but it's still a very helpful filter for you to experiment with. So to apply the bloom effect, it's actually not that difficult. You basically need to duplicate your coloring and then blur it quite a lot. I'd recommend the 40 to 50 range-ish. And as soon as it's done, you basically want to go to wherever the curves option is on your program, and you need to shape it kind of like an S, kind of like I'm doing on the video, and you'll know when you're doing it right. It's going to look kind of like this, like a lot of contrast. And you basically want to toggle between the screen blending mode or the add glow, or add if you don't have add glow, and just lower the opacity. I usually go to around 20 to 30. It really depends on the coloring, because sometimes the bigger it is, maybe you might need a little bit less. So it's up to you to decide, and it does definitely give a nice glow to it, which is why I like using this primarily in sunset type colorings. So you don't have to use it, but I definitely would recommend experimenting with it. So for this coloring of guts, I'm going for a sunset environment, and the goal to make the colors pop is that you use colors that are associated with that palette within your filters. So right here, I'm making a new layer and I'm setting this one to overlay. So I wouldn't recommend going above 30 for this one. I feel like that's the maximum range that I would go for. So 30, maybe 20 minimum. I don't really think you need to go lower than that. The effect might be a little bit washed out if you do. And I have an orange tone that I've placed within this layer. You just fill out the entire canvas, and that is already the first step done. So after that is my next filter that I add, which is color burn. I'm not really gonna get into what exactly it does, because I wouldn't really be able to tell you accurately, but it does add a little bit of contrast while also bumping up the highlights. So I'm going for a little bit more of a darker orange and filling the canvas with that in the color burn layer. And one other note, I definitely would not recommend going too high on the opacity for color burn. I'd say that between 5 to 10 is like the sweet range. So in this one I stuck with 6. It really just depends on what you think is best for your coloring. And honestly, you could just leave it here. These two combinations can work fairly well. But if you want to take it one step further, you can add one final layer and switch the blending mode to vivid light. So I treat vivid light similar to color burn in the sense that I don't want the opacity to be too high. So 5 to 10, that is kind of the range that I like to go for. And you could either go for a brighter orange or a darker. It really doesn't matter. Just as long as you stick within that orange to yellow to red color palette that you see within the sunset sky. So for the last one, I have a little trick that has to do with both the brightness and hard light blending mode. I actually learned this from a Chinese artist that was sharing it on Twitter, but I don't remember the name of their handle, but if I do, I'll make sure to put it on screen. But it is a very interesting way to boost the saturation within your actual coloring. So to do this trick, you basically need to duplicate your coloring, make another layer above it, and set it to brightness. From here, you just want to color pick literally anywhere within your canvas and fill out the entire canvas with that solid color. I would recommend making it a bit darker. I think if it's brighter, then it's going to be a little too saturated. So after you've done that, you basically merge it with the duplicated version underneath and switch that blending mode to hard light. Then just lower the opacity to whatever you feel like works best, and you'll notice that there is a shift in saturation when you turn the layer off and on. Another quick tip that could help those who are just exploring the use of Gaussian blur, or those who might know how to do it but just don't really take this into account. So the main mistake that I probably see is that a lot of people have very harsh transitions on the areas that they blur on their coloring, and it can be easily avoided. Basically, what you want to do is just make sure that the area that you're blurring is separated from the rest of your coloring. So you can select that area, copy paste, duplicate, just do whatever you can to make sure that it's separate and above the main panel. Then you can add your blur effect to that, and from there just switch the blending mode of that specific layer to subtract. Once you've done that, you're going to notice that it becomes all black, and you're going to be able to have an easier time seeing the areas that you're going to smoothen out. So you can take a soft eraser, you can take a blur or smudge tool and just go over the edges that are very harsh and smooth them out a little bit, and that is probably the quickest way to go about this. If you want to have an easier time controlling the strength of the blur effect around specific areas on your coloring, Clip Studio users, I would recommend that you download a blur brush. And the reason why is that it makes it so much easier to not only add blur, but you basically have control over how strong you want it to be on certain areas. I'm assuming that it's probably due to pen pressure and settings like that, but it definitely will make your job so much easier. I do believe that this is something that you can do on other apps like Photoshop, but Clip Studio users, that is something that you can definitely download off the asset store. Gradient maps are a little tricky, especially if you're someone who's unfamiliar with them, so I want to show you guys how I like to use them. Clip Studio users, just know we've got a whole catalog of gradient maps that we can get from the Clip Studio asset store, so just have a look, find whatever you want, and you'll be able to use it in this process. I start by making a new gradient map layer, and I try to choose colors that are similar to the palette that I'm going for within my own coloring. And you'll see me here just clicking through different gradients just for the purpose of showing you guys how they look, how they work, and I'm just applying different ones just to show you how quickly and efficiently they can change the entire tone of your coloring. Once you've got a gradient that you feel is going to work best for your coloring, you can now just apply it, and I usually like to set the blending mode of that gradient layer to overlay, and I like to lower the opacity to around 30%. Now there is an alternative blending mode that I sometimes like to use, and that one is divide. So I go through the exact same process, but instead I switch the blending mode to divide, and I lowered the opacity to around 5 to 10%. I feel like going above 10% is a little too much, so stick to that range. And I kind of just like the effect that the divide blending mode gives, so sometimes if I'm trying to play around with different options, try something new, I like to go with this method. Rendering rain is probably something that people ask me the most for tips, and so I figured that I would take you guys through my process. And I already have this existing coloring of Yuji, so I'm just going to add rain to it and show you guys how I would approach it. So when I'm rendering rain, I have my own brushes that I use to make the process quicker, but just keep a note that this is something that you can do with the default brushes that you probably have in your software. First, I use my rain brush to obviously add some rainfall to the coloring, and you kind of want to spread them apart, and reason being is because having them look too even in shape and in placement makes it feel a lot less real. You want to have a varying amount of rainfall sizes, and the reason why is because it helps depict depth within your coloring. So typically raindrops, the further back they are, the smaller they become. So if you start to implement that, it is a very good way to emulate the more realistic approach to what rain is really like in real life. Now that we have the rainfall down, the next step is going to be adding the streaks of water on the skin, on the clothes, and other objects that are a part of the character. Make a multiply layer and lower the opacity to around 15 to 25%. I'd say that's probably the sweet spot. And after you've done that, you can color pick the character's skin and just bring the value down quite a bit, but not all the way to where it's reached black. So maybe like a dark brown, dark red, that's probably where you want to be. So yes, just avoid using black and just use that dark brown, and it can get the job done. I started out using a pen brush, but I recommend that you use something a lot more smooth and water-like. And the reason why is because I feel that it does a better job at emulating the look of how, the water droplets look when it's like pouring down your skin. So definitely use a softer brush. Clip Studio uses, you can use Smooth Watercolor 2. If you don't have them, those are two brushes that you can download from the Clip Studio Asset Store. Now that we have all the water streaks down, it's time to add the highlights. And I don't really plan the placement of the highlights, but I try to kind of randomize them. Not only placement, but size as well. And even though they are highlights, there are still areas that we're going to have to take into account for the light fall off. And that basically means that the further you go from your light source, then less light is reaching that area. So you're going to notice that there are some parts where I'm going to use a soft eraser and just erase the highlights a little bit just to darken them, but not completely. But that is my reasoning to why I'm doing it. Once the highlights are done, you can now add the rain splashes that are hitting against the character. I have some of my own brushes that give me that effect. However, like I mentioned before, you can use the default brushes in your software or just whatever brush you have at your disposal. After you've added your rain splashes, you are now basically done. I don't really do much after that last step. However, in the recording, you're going to see me add a little bit of fog and test out some blending modes and colors. And the reason being is that I'm just trying to make it fit a little bit more of my typical rainy atmosphere. Along with rain, blood is another thing that a lot of people ask for how I approach it. So I'm also going to take you guys through that in this part. So I start by making a new layer and I set it to multiply. And after that, I use the same smooth and water-like type brush and I paint the blood onto the skin. As I'm painting the blood, you guys are gonna notice that I do erase bits of it. I don't actually know what this method is called or process, if it even has a name. I just call it the erase method. And I just erase bits of the blood because I want to give it a bit of randomness to the way that the blood is pouring down the skin. So this is something that I would recommend that you guys also try. once I feel like I'm satisfied with the shape of the blood, I usually use a textured brush right after. And the reason why I do that is because adding a little bit of texture onto the blood also does kind of help it look a little bit more realistic. And it is something that I noticed a lot of people were doing when I was studying how to, approach blood rendering. So I did implement it onto my own process. So you could use, rake brushes or just any other like oil textured brush that you might have. It could probably do the same effect. Alright, so once you're satisfied with the shape and the textures that you've just added, you want to now focus on the highlights of the blood. So you need to make a new layer. You could either set it to hard light or glow dodge and use that to create the highlights. After I finish with the highlights, I like to add some reflected light onto the blood. You'll usually see me using a bluer tone, kind of on the saturated end, and I just lower the opacity to do this. So that was the last and final step, and here's a comparison of before and after, and that is basically all I do to approach blood. Using textures or overlays or photo bashing is definitely something that could help speed up your process if you are someone who is used to painting in the textures yourself. I like to use fabric textures for clothing, and I have my own set of concrete-like textures that I'm going to use for either, rocks, debris, buildings, and things like that. So once I apply the texture, I usually just set it to soft light blending mode, and I like to lower the opacity to around 15 to 30%. It really depends, because sometimes you might need more, sometimes less, but I feel like lower than 15 or higher than 30 is, you don't really need it. I think 15 to 30 is a sweet spot. So once you've gotten your airbrush, you basically just want to color pick the environment that your character is within. You can see Ichigo, the background is just, plain sky and just some dust underneath, and I'm color picking around it and just, going over his silhouette. You obviously don't want to do too much and not too little, but just from going over some areas of his silhouette, you can already see that the effect is in motion. Just a little bit of tweaking and you'll definitely notice that it looks like your character is literally within the environment that you're trying to depict him in. And here I'm just turning the atmosphere layer on and off, and you can definitely see the difference. It really does go a long way, and it's not even much. So I highly recommend that this is something that you guys put into practice so that you can implement it with every coloring that you do. And as you can see, I've actually had previous layers already created on this coloring, like just previous individual elements to all make up the atmosphere that I'm going for. So for my final tip, it would be using vignettes in your coloring. A lot of you who are familiar with my own colorings already know that I like to have a little bit of a cinematic approach to the way that my colorings look, and using vignettes is something that I've incorporated into my own style, and it's just something that I got from doing my own studies of, movie screen caps and noticing that a lot of them also implement vignettes. It isn't something that you have to do, but if you're someone who also wants to have a little bit of a cinematic approach, it is definitely something you could add to your aesthetic. I've already got my own pre-made vignette effect that I just drag onto the screen and increase the size, but it is very simple to make. You can literally just take an airbrush and brush all four corners of your canvas and boom, you have it there. But if you're lazy like me, or if you just really want to speed up your process, you can obviously download it from the asset store if you are a Clip Studio user, and if you're not, you can always just search for a PNG or an overlay that you can use as well. So that brings us to the end, and honestly this video was way longer than I intended it to be, so I want to apologize for that, and I hope you guys can bear with me. I did have lots of other tips I wanted to share, but I figured it would be a lot easier to just make a part 2 for this. And for future videos I do have some ideas, like how to make your colorings look more cinematic and how to render water, fire, and maybe some other effects. However, if there's anything that you guys want to learn specifically, you can just let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to turn them into videos. So thank you guys for watching, hope you guys leave a like, and I'll catch you guys next time.